Now, when you're looking here in this wonderful program here in Adobe Reader, remember you can not only highlight things, but if you want to type text on there, I'm going to show you how to do that as well. Look over here on the side toolbar, and if you look at the little thing that looks like an ink pen scribbling, it says fill and sign. And if you click on that, this screen will come up, and click on fill and sign. Don't worry about, you're not going to sign anything. All right, and you see the little extra toolbar that comes up under here. And you can literally write by typing on this like A and B right here, where you can add text, and we can change the color to, let's make it orange in honor of Donald Trump. Okay, so if I wanted to type things like Mr. Scalise, dating Federalist number 10, and then you just hit close, disco. All right, so everybody with us so far? It's fantastic. Okay, now let's read a couple of things here together, and we're going to go over parts of this. James Madison wrote Federalist 10 to address a common concern that factions or groups would become too influential in the United States. The ultimate goal of his work was to diffuse any fears that these factions would somehow dominate the government. Here's an example. A group, the American Federation of Teachers, my teachers union, do we want the AFT having like a ridiculous amount of influence over the government? Why not? Why do we not want the AFT having influence over decisions, say, about marijuana laws? What's wrong with having one group having too much influence? Then other groups don't have enough influence, and you're going to see that in a second. So take a look at what Madison says here. The first statement, he says, look, by faction, I understand a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of action. Okay? And so that's part of his key right there is that he says, hey, it's a group of people who are united by some common impulse, or he says a number of citizens united by some type of impulse of common actions, right? So, for example, like I said, AFT is one for instance here, but we'll also throw in a group like, have you ever heard of the AARP, the American Association for Retired Persons, right? They represent old people, okay? That's a group of citizens who have some common impulse. We want to help old people, right? Now, he says this is some type of group united and actuated by some common impulse adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interest of the community. Meaning, what do these groups care about? Themselves, and who do they not care about? Other people, okay? Adverse to the rights of other citizens of the community. Meaning, our issues are important. I don't care how this affects other people, okay? The National Rifle Association, what do they want? Gun rights. And do they care? And I don't want to call like I don't want you to think they're crass in terms of they don't care if people get shot, but do you think like somebody who's an NRA member says, well, that's an acceptable risk that you have to take with having freedom, and that's their perspective. It doesn't matter what the rest of the community thinks. They're going to try to get their way on policy, and that's okay because every group does that. And he says if that's the case, groups can be dangerous. All right. Now, question number one here, and like I said, we're going to type some things in. After reading Madison's definition, does he have a positive or negative view of factions, and what context clues demonstrate this? What do you think? Does he have a positive or negative view of factions? Definitely a negative view, but why is that? What leads you to believe that? Right, that they're adverse to the rights of other citizens. Okay, so we're going to put in here negative, and we'll put that in orange as well. Keywords adverse to the rights of others or to the aggregate interest of the community. Okay, it doesn't mean that they're monsters or bad people. It just means, hey, we want what we want. We're a little bit selfish, right? The same way that teachers, it's like, hey, when the state government looks at us and says, well, we'd love to give teachers a pay raise, but we're really stressed on our budget as it is. And you're like, yeah, that's not our problem. You figure it out and give us a raise. And they're like, well, what if we have to cut funding from the forestry service, and they're like, well, that's really sad. Give us our raise. Okay, and if you're a member of government, you got to look out for the interests of everybody. All right, so it's a negative view. All right, Madison says, look, these factions can be kind of dangerous, and we have to figure out how to keep them under control. Okay, and he says there's two ways you can do that. You can remove the causes of factions, or you can control its effects. All right, so there's two ways to deal with factions. You could get rid of their causes or control their effects. Personally, I like handling a problem before it becomes a problem. Prevention. That's the key to good health, Billups. Don't get hit by a softball. Okay? Now, bless you. Removing the causes. Okay? James Madison said, we could simply get rid of the causes of factions. Can we prevent groups from forming? If this could be done, then factions won't ever be a problem because, if you prevent groups from forming at all, they can't try to influence the government. And Madison said there's two ways that exist to remove the causes of factions. One, you can destroy liberty. And two, by giving every citizen the same opinions, the same passions, the same interests. That's lovely. All right. Now, something that's relevant here, he says if you want to get rid of groups, if you want to prevent them from ever forming, you could destroy liberty. What's liberty mean? Freedom. Okay. Now, question number 2 here says, what freedoms in the U.S. Constitution are important for groups to exist? What's a freedom, if you're an interest group, what's a freedom that you have to have? What is it? Say it. Speech, freedom of speech, right? If you're a group and you want to influence government, you have to be able to speak your mind. What else? Press, not so much. That's a helpful, though. It's helpful. There's 3 big ones. Speech is one of them. Protest or petition the government. And then there's the most important one that's important to groups. Assembly. Okay? Assembly. The freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom to petition the government. Okay? Those 3 freedoms are monumentally important if you're going to have groups. All right? And James Madison says, hey, what we could do, we could prevent groups by forming to crush those liberties right there. Right? Because that way, if you don't have freedom of assembly, we could punish you just for gathering together in a group. Right? So let's say that, for example, we have an important decision to make as a class, whether we will have chocolate or vanilla ice cream tomorrow. How many chocolate people do I have? That's just one chocolate person? I'm with you too. How many vanilla people do we have? What is wrong with you people? Kaiser, you're not raising your hand for anything? Okay. All right. Geez, the record show is 2 chocolate people and the rest a bunch of weirdos. Okay. Now, ultimately, if they wanted to, they could take away our freedom to assemble. If we wanted to get rid of all the chocolate-loving people in the world, then, they could be like, well, hey, if you don't have the freedom to assemble together, then, when Cooper and I try to start our pro-chocolate faction, they just simply have us arrested for that. Or anytime we mention something pro-chocolate, they're like, well, sorry, you're out of here. Right? Oh, gosh. Now, if we could squelch out liberty to save the nation from these factions, then wouldn't it be a good thing? According to Madison, the answer is a clear no. He says the first remedy, that of destroying liberty, is worse than the disease. Okay? He says, look, yeah, you could get rid of liberty, but that's bad. That's worse than the problem itself. Liberty is to faction what air is to fire. What happens if you take air or oxygen away from a fire? It dies. Okay? It's essential to political life. It nourishes faction. Okay? The thing is here is that think of this. Like when was the last anybody been sick recently? Gosh, I tell you what, you ever get like I hate this time of year because there's always like the possibility you get like a stomach virus and it's the worst. It's the worst. And your stomach feels all nasty. You feel like you got to puke all the time. You know there's bacteria in your stomach that are not good for you. Why don't you just drink bleach? Well, it'll kill the bacteria, right? But it'll kill you too. The cure is worse than the disease itself. Okay? And that's what James Madison is saying. He says, look, We could prevent groups from forming by destroying liberty. But, and question number 3 addresses this too. Why is that a bad thing, though? Why is it a bad thing to destroy liberty? All right. That's one of the very reasons we started this country, to be able to have some freedoms in the first place. And so we'll put that in here for question number 3 as well, is that freedom is essential to our government and our democracy. All right. You don't want to squash out freedom. That's part of our points for being here. Okay. What's the point in having freedoms if you're just going to turn right around and crush them just so people can't form together in groups? And by the way, is it natural for people to want to form groups and hang out and associate with the same people? And who do you all associate with? Why are they your friends? Yeah, you have things in common. I mean, you probably are nice and cordial to people who aren't like you, but at the same time, you don't hang out with them on the regular, right? Now, Madison said, look, destroying liberty is not really an option, okay? So we should consider the second way to get rid of, to deal with the factions, the issue of factions here. And that is, you could give everybody the same opinions, passions, and interests. Is this a legitimate solution? I mean, theoretically, like if you could give everybody the same opinions, but why is it just theoretically, Kaiser? It's not reality. What are the odds that people are going to have the same opinions? Slim to none. It's completely unrealistic to think that humans are going to think in the same regard or have the same interests. What's important to me as a teacher is not important to somebody who is a hunter, and gun rights are important to them. Or, for example, let's say that, for some individuals like Kaiser, are women's issues, or like you were talking about LGBT issues earlier, are those important rights that you would rate as a priority for government? Yeah. Whereas, like, somebody else would be like, I don't think those are really that big a deal. And they may not even agree with them. And then, Tame over here is like, free Palestine. You're like, give Palestine their homeland, give them their autonomy. And other people are like, that's all well and good and everything, Tama, but that's really not high on my priority list. Okay? We don't have the same interests and the same passions because we all come from different backgrounds. And look, if we all had the same passions, same interests, we'd be a bunch of little robots. And that would be miserable. Okay? So, Madison says we can't remove the causes of factions by destroying liberty because that'd go against the very the very idea of establishing a nation that wanted freedom. And it's not even possible to give everybody the same interests. So he says, if we can't remove the causes of factions, if we can't prevent them from forming, we have to control the effects. Okay? You have to minimize the danger of factions. All right? And he says, here's how we do that. Okay? He says, if a faction is a number of people comprising less than a majority, it's easy to deal with the situation. He goes, relief is supplied by the Republican principle, which enables the majority to defeat its the faction's sinister views by regular vote. And he said, look, it's really easy to deal with a minority faction, okay? If you guys are really wanting vanilla ice cream bad, and it's just me and Cooper who want chocolate ice cream, how do you deal with us, the minority faction? What is it? Not ignore, outvote them. Okay? He says this is what we mean by the Republican principle here. In a democracy, it's real simple. You just outvote them because we're only 2 people, and you guys are like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 to 2. You win. That's easy. Oh, I counted right, Kaiser. Did I? Why are you scanning around? Stop that. All right. But what happens if a faction or a group, like what if the sinister group isn't us, it's you all, the group in the majority? He says, what do we do then? How do we deal with that problem? Okay? And Madison said, look, the new government under the Constitution is going to be able to deal with this problem. All right? Majority factions are dangerous too. And he says, here's what we're going to do. He says a republic, by which I mean the government, the scheme of representation takes place opens a different prospect and promises the cure that we're seeking. Okay? This is a republic. That's the cure for the problem. All right? A republic, remember, a republic is where we elect people to make decisions for us. Ooh. All right? Now, he says, look, here's how the government's going to help. Here's how a republic will make a difference. He says, to refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of the country. Okay? He says, you know what? You want to decide these views, you need a republic. And a republic means you got a body of people to pass ideas through. Okay? What body of people do we pass things through here? What's the body, the particular group of people that makes our laws? What is it? And what do we call that body of people? Not state governments and also Congress. Okay, he's talking about the national government here, though, so he's mainly talking about Congress. And he said, hey, a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of their country. And he says, hey, you don't let the people at large decide, because a majority faction, you've got a majority of people voting on an issue, and also you don't want mob rule. We're terrified of that. So you put it through the lawmaking body. Okay? And he says that's really a good thing. All right? Because a small group of people will make a better decision, and he says their wisdom will best discern the true interest of the country. And it says the representatives of the people will be more consonant to the public good than if pronounced by the people themselves. All right? He said, hey, a small group of people in a republic, that body of people that we chose to be our representatives, they'll make a better decision than the people themselves. Ooh. Right? Now, ask you this was question 5, and you don't have to write anything down for this one. Do you think Madison's right? Do you think a small body of people, like, say, Congress, will make a better decision than a large body of people like the public at large? Why? In theory, who should these members of Congress be? Qualified, intelligent people who've earned the respect of their communities, in theory. Okay? And that a small body of people less likely to be inflamed by mob mentality. All right? Now it gets better here. Okay? He says, look, if you're going to have a lawmaking body to pass all these ideas through, you have to have a certain number of elected officials. Okay? And it says, however small the republic may be, you have to have the representatives raised to a certain number in order to guard against the cabals. That means like the bad deeds of a few. And however large the republic may be, it has to be limited to a certain number in order to guard against the confusion of a multitude. All right, let's translate that here, okay? If we were making a real student body government for Cabell Midland with 1,900 kids here, do we want a student body government of 1,000 kids? Why not? Why is it too many? You're right. You wouldn't be able to get anything accomplished. I mean, just letting everybody talk for 30 seconds would take 600 minutes. That's 10 hours. God, that'd be insane, right? So you can't have it too big. But also, too, would we want a student body government of just 3 people? Why not? It's not really representing all the different views here at Cabell Midland. This is what I like to call the Goldilocks principle. It's like my porridge can't be too cold and it can't be too hot. It has to be just right. Okay? And what we're going to say about this is, at least on number 6 here, is that the size of the lawmaking body can't be too small because it has to represent different ideas of the community, but not so large that it cannot get anything accomplished. Right? Now, what's even better is in our nation of 330 million people, we have 435 House members and 100 senators. 535 people making decisions about what laws we all have to follow. Oof. Oh, how about that? Right? So he's like, hey, having a republic matters. Okay? A republic, a lawmaking body of the right size is going to make good decisions. Now, something else is going to happen too, and this last paragraph is the most important by far. Okay? The smaller the society, all right, the fewer probably will be the distinct parties and interests composing it. The fewer the distinct parties and interests, the more frequently a majority be found of the same party. Like, remember how we talked about people in West Virginia are really different than people in California, okay? West Virginians are more prone to thinking like Californians. They have their own views, and they tend to think alike too, all right? And he goes, if that's the case, you're going to have a majority where people will try to execute their plans of oppression, all right? And he says, hey, those majority factions, the best way to deal with them is extend the sphere, and you have a greater variety of interests who have a less common will to oppress other people. And here's what he's saying with that. What happens to the number of different interests in the country if we make the country larger, geographically and population-wise? Different interests. And when you have so many interests in the country, what's it impossible for any one group to do? Have a real majority. Can you think of any group that really represents a majority of the people? I don't know that I do. I did not want to redact that. I don't know why that came up. I want to fill and sign here and add one more comment in here. Large republics. Harder for any one group to gain a majority because there are so many different interests. In a country of the size of the United States, there are so many different ways of thinking, diverse ways of thinking, that no one group will ever be able to dominate everything. Nobody represents the viewpoint of all Americans, or at least even a majority of them. Okay? Questions, comments about Federalist 10? Now, a large republic, Madison says a large republic will help prevent groups from ever becoming a problem in the first place. All right? And he said they won't be as influential as what you're worried about because nobody will ever be a majority group. A large republic prevents that. Okay? Now, we'll talk about this more later on, but this goes against what the Anti-Federalists were saying in Brutus number 1, where they argued that small republics were the best way to go because you'd have laws passed that would be beneficial to any group or given area. All right? That's all we got for today, gang.